Hello, all. Welcome to ASAE's production of AI and Advocacy, Promise and Pitfalls. We're really excited to welcome you. This is hosted by our wonderful volunteer leaders from the ASAE Government Relations and Advocacy's Professional Advisory Council and the Technology Professionals Advisory Council. So this will be a great discussion today. My name is Mary Kate Cunningham. I'm the Senior Vice President of Public Policy at ASAE. I'm your lobbyist and glad to have you here today. Today, our speakers are Gretchen Senstra from Delcor Technology Solutions, Mark Ames from AIHA, Carlos Cardenas, co-founder of Association Latinos, and Sherry Stanley Whitworth from Fiscal Note. So I will now hand the floor over to Gretchen Senstra.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Of course, we need to start with a quick poll. I put it in the chat. We just kind of want to understand who's here. What is your experience with AI? And what we're looking for is not AI like using Grammarly or something. We're talking about the tools that are emerging right now, ChatGPT, Bing, Bard. So if everyone, this is the website, you can scan this code or go to Slido and there's the other one. Regular user. Is that you, Mark? No? Oh, okay.
That's me.
All right. That's you, Carlos?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, got one. 50-50. On the water. Okay. Well, so I'll keep this up for a minute, but I will turn this over to Mark, who's going to give us a demo. He's been evaluating all these tools as a regular user, and they change every day. So everything that's said today will, we have an asterisk by every piece of advice or comment that any of us make today is only good for this moment in time.
That's right. So everyone, make sure you're playing with this stuff immediately. So I apologize if there's a little bit of a whine in the background. That's my computer overheating. So it's the fan. So let me go into the presenter mode and I'll see if I can successfully navigate PowerPoint. All right, everyone. Hopefully everyone is able to see the presentation. If you're not, please do let me know. So this demo, we're going to demo something that I use pretty much every single day, usually multiple times a day, and that's using ChatGPT for legislative analysis. You can use other tools, but just for this example, using ChatGPT because it's super popular. So when you go to ChatGPT, and we can talk about how to access the tool and go over the super basics if you'd like to do that. But assuming that you go to the website and you log on and you're interacting with the chatbot, you're ready to go. So the first thing you want to do is enter into that chat box a prime. So you want to prime the chatbot into a role. Now, the reason why you want to prime it into a role is because it's going to yield better results. You'll see this in just a second, but it's going to yield approximately 3 times more content than if you just asked the bot to summarize the entered text. I'll go over the 2 versions in just a moment, but this is an example of a prompt that you want to use. I use this exact prompt pretty much every single day. I want you to act as an expert in legislative analysis. I'll provide you with legislative text and you will produce accurate summaries. You're going to get a result, something like that. The chatbot, ChatGPT, will tell you that it's ready to go, it's in the role, and then you're going to enter the bill text and you'll get a response. However, I've encountered this many times. Sometimes there's a bill or regulation that's just too long. And so what it can do, there aren't a whole lot of great solutions yet, but you do have some options. You can break up the text into separate entries. And when you do that, then even if you ask ChatGPT, it's kind of frustrating. You can say, hey, ChatGPT, I'm going to provide you that the bill is too long. I'm going to provide you with multiple entries, and I just want you to hold off and don't provide any summaries until I'm done. And it will say, okay, sure, I totally get that. I'm going to wait for you. You let me know when you're ready to go. And then you put in one part and it produces a summary. And I'm like, oh my God. So you don't have a lot of great options. And so what you want to do, so what usually your best option that I've found is that you can either take the subsection of the longer bill that you're interested in. So sometimes I'm a federal and state lobbyist, and sometimes the bills that I deal with, they're really big, but I just care about a small section. So maybe you can just take the section that you're really interested in, and that'll fit within the limits. Otherwise, you can summarize yourself the summaries that it produces. Otherwise, you can ask ChatGPT to combine its response into a single response. The trouble is that it's kind of strange. It will hallucinate. Like one time, actually this happened several times, it produced, I asked it, please summarize all your responses, and it summarized like every response that it ever gave to me. And so unfortunately I can hallucinate. It's the other option is,
Hey, Mark,
yeah.
what does hallucinate mean? So
Yep.
hallucinate in regular terms means something different in AI land.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay.
We're gonna should have defined that because we're gonna hit that. We're gonna do a demo of that.
Yeah, because this happens a lot, right there.
Right, exactly. So hallucinate is inaccurate information.
Yeah.
When the chatbot produces inaccurate information, it can sound convincing. Sometimes it's nonsensical, but hallucination is just the AI chatbot lingo for a response that contains inaccurate or misleading information.
Yeah. Okay. So now what happens, Mark? We've got step 2. We're trying to train the bot. Where do we go now?
Exactly. So then, so the other thing that you can use is maybe use a trusted third-party service that can allow you to upload and analyze a longer bill. So here are the results using the free version of ChatGPT. This is without role priming. So you can see this is all accurate, by the way. So I'm very familiar with this bill. I've been working on it for a while. And so I can tell you that this summary is all completely accurate. You get a nice 1-paragraph summary. And for comparison, when you use role priming, then you're going to get about approximately 3 times the result. So this is the free version. So then
what did it add, Mark? What did it add here?
Yep. So free version, just like, because sometimes you just want that nice paragraph summary if you're connecting with your members, something like that, then that's useful. But sometimes maybe you want to provide even more content. So this breaks it down into the sections of the bill, goes into more details. Again, all of this is accurate. So there's no hallucination or inaccurate information that's provided, because in this case, the bill text that I provided fit within the chat box space. Now, if you go up to the paid version of ChatGPT, which is currently GPT-4, and you use role priming, then you get something that even is a little bit easier to read. So back we go. It's like, okay, well, that's kind of those are chunky text. I can't really, it's, yeah, I got to read it, but there's a bunch of text that I have to analyze myself. Here, all right, so we got 6 points, and each of them are easier to digest. So that's an example of what ChatGPT can do. So that's the end of this demo. But before I stop the screen share, does anybody have any questions? We can jump back and forth or drill down a little bit on.
So Mark, what's your role at AIHA? You said you're...
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm the head of government relations for AIHA. So I cover all legislative, federal regulations, everything within AIHA government relations.
And then you're part of the government relations council too. So you have 2 roles.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm the vice chair of ASAE's Gray PAC, the Government Relations and Advocacy Council. Okay.
Do you get a similar experience when you use other tools? You were comparing, Mark, Bing, ChatGPT, others. Is it a similar behaviors though when you use priming? Yes, so it is. Okay. So I posted a study that I conducted not too long ago on the government relations and advocacy professionals, and also the AI working group on ASAE's Collaborate. And I compared ChatGPT, Bing, and Bard. And I asked it questions that are relevant to the association I represent, AIHA. And
and yet you do get similar responses. GPT tends to be the most conversational, whereas Bing is the most accurate because it provides citations for all of its sources. So
Okay.
it's the most accurate, but it also provides the least amount of information. So it'll almost always give you something that looks more like this, even if you prime it. But it'll cite all of its sources, and it's guaranteed. It has a much more probability to be accurate. Bing, or rather Bard, can produce useful information, but it's in my experience, it's the most likely to hallucinate out of all of the major chatbots.
So what do you use this for every day, Mark? You know, this is something you said every day you use it for something. What are some of the ways you use it? And then, you know, Sherry, you're an active user too. But what are the top 3 things, Mark, that you use it for every day? And do you use all 3 and compare, or do you use different tools for different purposes? And
Yeah.
we're fine if you don't want to share your screen anymore, or you can.
Yeah, thanks. Sure. Thanks. So I go through a lot. So AIHA is a fiscal note client, and so we're very happy customers in that regard. But I go through a lot of legislation with our advocacy associate, Riley Cagle, who just came on. Then every day we're analyzing a lot of legislation because we're a workplace. So AIHA is focused on workplace and community health and safety. So we have a pretty broad jurisdiction of issues that we cover. So we're constantly pumping out opportunities to our members and asking them whether we want to get engaged in various things. And part of that process is providing them with a summary of the legislative or government action. Unfortunately, not all of those bills have summaries associated with them. So in that case, I usually have to, I've only got 2 options. I either analyze it myself and provide a summary, or I run it through one of the bots and I ask it to summarize. And then, of course, I check the work. That's one of the important things, of course.
So someone was talking about citations and how to know if there's hallucinations are happening. You know, how do you fact check the results, even when they're cited? Because I think you shared one with me that it was a citation, so I felt better. And then when I clicked on the citation took me to a different place. It was actually wrong, right? Isn't that part of the work you were sharing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's
scary.
So that's the thing, is that if you don't know, if you're a user who does not know that something is wrong, that a citation is off, then you might not be able to catch it. So yeah, these things, all of the bots have disclaimers that say, hey, you know, these are experimental, they might provide biased or inaccurate responses, but they still provide responses. And so Bing is really the only thing that provides citations. Bard will provide citations, and I'll go over that in the demo of hallucinations, but it'll even get the citations wrong. So even if it's like we're quoting, it kind of intimates that it's quoting a source because it provides the source ostensibly of its content. I've looked through and it's wrong.
Nice. So check your work.
That's the thing, right? So this is really useful, but it's always, you want to use these as a starting point. Treat them like an intern, like you got a new intern on
staff, I like that.
doing some work, and they're helpful, but they're sort of junior level. Someday they might get more sophisticated, but right now you don't ever want to, or hardly ever, just rip something from one of the bots and send it out to your members without checking it. You always got to do your diligence, for sure.
Yeah. So you said you use it for analysis, and then you also mentioned to me that it helps you write things. So are there things that you trust it more, like that your intern can write a press release or write some basic information that just speeds you along?
So event descriptions such as this, we used it to help craft an event description for this, so it's useful for brainstorming, writing action alerts. So AIHA sends out action alerts to its members. It's useful for creating first drafts of things, even for a blog post or something like that. So I write blog posts for AIHA, and we don't post those. I did one experimental thing that was clearly indicated as an experiment because ChatGPT honestly wrote a really good article about indoor air quality schools and industrial hygiene. And so just like, it was a really nice 800-word article. So we just posted it as an experiment to show how sophisticated these things are.
Yeah.
But yeah, these things are an add-on that, so it's writing blog articles, first draft. So it's basically the first drafts of a lot of stuff. It gets you over, it's always like easier to edit something generally than it is to create that initial content. And so that's where it's really useful. At least I find.
And then you
Emails,
noted this.
emails as well. Emails to membership.
Oh, get you started. And then Carlos, I think, mentioned, and so did you, Mark, that this is a good assistant. So if you needed to take notes for you to help you write an article, because I think, Carlos, haven't we used this at Tech Council to just kind of transcribe and get us started?
Yeah, I'll say we experienced some similar issues. So we had a CEO, CIO, the importance of the relationship, CEO, CIO, and we took the Zoom transcript. It's a video. We split apart the audio. We transcribed that into text. We had about 13,000 words, right? And so the limit for the free version of ChatGPT is right around 1,500 words or 2048 tokens, I believe. ChatGPT 4 gives you double that, right? So we hit the same wall where we had to into sections. And I agree, Mark, I saw some hallucinations there. I think it even said a panelist was John Graham. Yeah, so the first try, but again, it's a conversation, right? So you need to say, well, wait a minute, John Graham is not a panelist. Can you look at that again? And so you can kind of refine that. But go ahead.
No.
So I went down that road. I tried a free tool, Chat PDF, which is a resource we're going to share. I also took the liberty of creating my own Python script and using the open AI APIs. And so I wrote a Python script to try to do the same thing, mixed results all the way around with some, finessing and, prompt revisions. I got what I was looking for in terms of a 900-word article. I prompted it to say, you are a senior editor-in-chief. Give me, 5 key takeaways and produce a 900-word article. And so again, it's a conversation, so you have to refine it along the way. It's not going to get.
And that's that priming, right, Carlos? Like adding the prime. Yeah.
Yep.
What about when it's a note taker?
Well, one second, Carlos, can you explain what a token is? We had a question about what's a token?
So that is the infrastructure, right? In terms of how open AI, if you're chatting with it, if you're interacting with it, they set a limit in terms. You can't just take a 10,000 page article and feed it and say, summarize this, right? So there are limits. And I think part of that is trying to monetize it as well. So that is what a token is, and they set limits on the amount of characters. So 2048 basically correlates to the amount of text, including spaces and special characters.
Yeah. Sherry, how about you? How are you using this tool? And just quick, tell us who you are, why you're here, and then.
Yeah, I'm Sherry Whitworth. I am Managing Director of Public Affairs and Advocacy at FiscalNote. And I work with clients like Mark on their advocacy outcomes and trying to use technology in general to get better outcomes. And so I would categorize myself, unlike Carlos and Mark, who are light years ahead of me already on this. I'm a toe in the water. I am having to learn how to use ChatGPT and other AI-driven tools so that I can talk about them with our customers and kind of break down that scaries of, actually trying something different and how they can use these tools to be driving better outcomes, more efficiencies, and really some of the things I'll talk about a little bit later, actually get better outcome, better open rates, and better action rates from their calls to action.
Okay. So we have another demo coming up for hallucinations, but one of the things we want to talk about is, safety and some of the other concerns that people have. So we've talked a little bit about how it can help you. What are some things that you're flagging to be aware of on the safety front? And we'll only spend a few minutes because this could take up the rest of our time. But what are some bullets, Mark, that you think people just be aware of this, and this? And Carlos also is very tuned into this.
Influence. So how do the bots come up with their information? With Bing, it's a little bit clearer because they cite their source, but even so, where is the information coming from? And what happens if the information is inaccurate? What can you do about it? And like, what do you, if somebody comes across inaccurate or misleading information about an issue or topic or organization, then what do you do? So, like, with, as I'll show in a moment, BARD is consistently putting out inaccurate information about the association I represent. Anybody who goes, it's not like seriously wrong, like, it's not like, calling us something terrible, but it's factually inaccurate. And so what do we do? Like, there's not much that we can do. And even if we got agreement from the developers of BARD that, hey, yeah, they're like, we're on the same page, like, yeah, this information is inaccurate, there's no guarantee that that actually could trickle down and that they could influence. So the people who create these bots don't actually always have the ability to influence them themselves, because they don't really understand. This is like the crazy thing. They don't really understand how specific responses are generating.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Right. So even if everyone was like, yeah, like, so you can get some cutoff things. So you've seen instances in which some of the AIs like Bing will cut off the conversation if you're talking about sentience or certain topics, or certain things that are deemed inappropriate. Then the bots will have like a failsafe and they'll cut the conversation. But aside from that, when it's just like inaccurate or misleading information, then what do you do? So when someone is looking up information about our organizations or the issues that we care about, and if something is, hot on the floor of a state or legislative floor, and it's people, so what happens when people start really using these chatbots, maybe instead of their search? Right now, a lot of people go to Google and increasingly Bing for their search to find out information. But then what happens when there's a closer integration, when the chatbots just become the default? That's how you discover information. And what happens if they're providing inaccurate information? How do you change that? Right now, one of the big concerns is, so if you go and then I'll turn it over to others, is if you Google something or you put it into traditional search on Bing, then it'll pop up. The results will be a function of what your website displays. It'll pull from your website. So it's a dynamic relationship between the people who are creating the content and the search engine provider, the search engine company. Right now, the only people who are in control, and it's loose control, are the people who created the bots. You don't have any direct control over how your issues or organizations are characterized. And that, to me, I'm like, well, that's a power shift. That's a massive power shift. And it's a crazy disruption in the relationship we've had for like 20 years.
So do you want to start showing the hallucinations,
Yeah,
and
sure.
we can kind of talk through that?
Yeah, let me do that real quick. Yeah, so this one will be pretty short, and let me go into that again. But we will just go through a couple examples of where. So again, hallucination when chatbots generate incorrect information. So this is not to pick on any of the chatbots, but Bing is, or other BARD is the example here. So I've highlighted the areas where the information is correct. AIG wishes that it had 30,000 members. I wish that we did, but we don't. And also got our mission incorrect in the other areas that are highlighted. We do have a journal, but it's not called the Journal of American Industrial Hygiene Association. And
so go back, Mark. So that's where it cited you, right? Oh no, I didn't see it. Okay.
Yeah, so it's kind of strange. So on the other draft, so one of
there it is.
Each of the bots are unique, and they have unique features about them. What BARD has is the ability to see different drafts of its response. So it provides you everything comes in 3 drafts, and it's just on the top. You can click other drafts, and then you'll see this these that you can select from. And it seems to be not in the first draft, but only on the second and third drafts for whatever reason. You can, but not always see a source. But this is the strange thing, that if you were to go to that source, you would see that this information is like, A, the source on that information is inaccurate about AIJ, but
Right.
B,
So the source is correct, but the data that it pulled.
no, both are incorrect.
Oh, both are incorrect.
Yeah, so that's the thing, is that you would think that you're like, oh, well, the information that's presented in Bard's response should match what's on the source, but it doesn't. So
And just
you're
a
like,
quick-
so it's like double fault there. That's strange. But
Quick
then you
pitch on
see,
that, if I can, Mark.
yeah.
So I wonder if a mission statements evolves over time, right? And there are cached copies, right? And does Google Bard or ChatGPT crawl those old and then combines them and gets it wrong? So
Right.
it's just a little bit of the mystery, right? The black box of AI at this point.
Right, exactly. So, and so then this is just an example that all 3 drafts were incorrect. Again, not huge. And, you know, it's nice at the end, and it consistently says that AIHA is a valuable resource. And in one response, it actually encouraged people to join AIHA, which is
That's
awesome.
good.
Right. But it's like, what happened? You know, like, that's really nice. But what happened if the reverse was true? So what happened if it said, hey, you know, AIHA is like a shady organization, you know, nobody should join AIHA. Be like, oh my gosh, that's terrible, right? Like that, we need to fix that. Well, what could we do? So we're fortunate in that it, you know, Bard apparently has a favorable view of AIHA, which is nice, but it's still getting information wrong. And the concern is that we don't know how these responses are being generated. We are not in control of how they're being generated, and even the developers aren't exactly sure how they're being produced. So those are some serious concerns. And again, this is by a product from Google, which is the absolute world's leading, it's the #1 way that people interact with the internet, through Google in the world. And they put out a chatbot that consistently produces wrong information.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stop the screen share unless folks want me to revisit something else.
I'll talk a little bit about the challenges, right, in terms of risks. I'll say inherent bias is one of them. I think I came across something where 2 linguists, right, and said they were asking something, gave a scenario and said a nurse and a doctor. Who's the doctor? Who's the nurse? And it kept saying him. He's a doctor. He's a doctor. It did not recognize that, you know, a nurse or a doctor could be a female. Data privacy, right? So, you know, you may have coworkers. If you don't have a policy at work, I think you should consider it, but you could have potentially coworkers feeding intellectual property into ChatGPT, right? And that's a big no-no. So I think you have to talk about it as an organization. I think it's a serious risk, and there's no way currently other than to block it to stop that from happening. I know they're introducing a business version, but I think that's still a ways away. You can say, don't add my chats, right, to the body of knowledge. Consistency, right? And so if I ask the same question and you ask it, maybe I do an experiment of 10 times. Am I going to get the same result 10 times? Probably not, right? So again, the algorithm driving that particular output or response. And I already mentioned the web crawling, right? You can have outdated, there are sites that preserve or archive an old website, and maybe that's being crawled and added as well to the body of knowledge.
Gretchen, I'll add one more. I think there's a lot of emerging markets and emerging issues. So the data might not be out there. And to Carlos's, so when it's pulling data, it might not have that much to pull from. And then it defaults to something that may seem similar, but it has nothing to do with what you are actually asking. And I think we all in our work use, even when we were prepping for this webinar, we have acronyms and slang we use in our jobs in our very niche world of who we're probably everyone on this call is an association, like it within your industry, you're using very niche and slang language that may be translated very differently by the bots because it's literal, it's what they are crawling for. So you may see a lot of poor matches of information and results coming in.
Okay. One of the things that we were talking about are policies. So I have another poll question around, do you have any policies right now to help guide people? And so there, let me back to our same Slido poll, but do you have anything in place right now in your organization to help guide this? Like Carlos pointed out a few things, Mark, and share. Are there things that people should start thinking about right now that are policies that are helpful? You know, you have policies that you need to for protection and just general, but are there other specific things that you would suggest?
I'll say if you're thinking about policies at your organization, but you haven't gotten around to it in terms of talking to leadership, put some guidance out there, right? And so don't let the Wild West occur in terms of your organization and let them roam free. Give them some, talk about it, have a conversation. Tell them that this is the tool, tell them things to be concerned about, but tell them that you have, this is the output is your output, right? And so your name is all over it. You've got to do due diligence and check some things, right? Fact check. So that would be.
And we were talking about this, like everybody said, this is new, and we've all dealt with new things before. And so it's really helpful if you put together a core team in your organization of people who are going to work together and hold each other accountable to test and verify and test these policies. I mean, we did that at Delcor. We have 5 or 6 of us who are really interested in it, and we agree that we're going to use it. And then, check in with each other about what's working and what's not, because I think these policies are going to be really fluid. And we've also talked about onboarding new staff, that as people come on, you have to, like your intern, I love your intern example, Mark, that your intern's just here for the summer and you get them all trained up and then you get a new intern. And so I think that's the other discipline that people need to start focusing on is, just how do you stay with it without becoming overwhelmed and having really heavy-handed policies that people just go around.
Yeah, I would add on to that don't ban this stuff. So it's scary.
That's some people say to
like, oh, we're not going to use this, it's too risky. Right. Instead, approach it responsibly. Gretchen, I really like your idea about having a core team that's looking into this. I feel like at AIHA, we probably organically created one of those because apparently I've become enamored and very curious about AI and have kind of learned a lot about it in perhaps a short time. But there are so many tools out there, and this is one of the things that Carlos will talk about in a little while. There are so many amazing tools out there that can boost your productivity and really do things that like you couldn't do before. And so many associations are either smaller or like every department does not have 1 million people in it. Like it's rare that an organization has like 20 or 30 people in a department. And so, and even if you did, then you're always looking for ways to do things more productively, cut costs, things like that. So whether it's image generation, video curation, video creation, all of those things, then there are some real ways that we can do a whole lot more good, advance our own and collective interests in using these new tools. And that's one of the reasons why we're like here talking to you, is because AI has been around for a long, long time. But it's just been in this recent sort of era, in this recent few months, that you've had some of the major movers coming online with new products, and that's created a real race to hook people into new products and services. Some of them are good, some of them less so, but unless you play around with them, then you're not going to know what's possible for your organization. So one of the things we're here talking to you about is how it can be used in government relations and advocacy.
So Mark, to that, how are you talking to your members who do government relations and advocacy? Or you were saying your legislative colleagues are using these tools too. How are you imparting your knowledge on your colleagues, either your state legislators or your members who are doing the same type of work, to help people learn how to fact check across each other's different realms?
Yeah, so I'm just talking about it like everywhere. AIT belongs to a coalition, like a lot of coalitions. And so we're talking about these things. And so as an example, I'm on a board of a coalition, and so we were thinking about creating an advocacy strategy for a particular bill. And we're talking about creating it from scratch. And I was like, well, how about we just ask GPT to create a quick, just a rough sketch of an advocacy plan for us. And the person who was the head of that was like, well, I've never really heard of that. So I just did it real quick, and I posted it right in the chat for everyone. And they were like, oh my gosh, this is actually, it's not great, but it's decent, and it's a good starting, it's got all the core components of an advocacy campaign, and it produced it in like 15 seconds.
So Mark, somebody was asking, do you cite that? So if you're using ChatGPT to develop something for you, when do you cite it as your reference? That was one of our questions.
Right. So I because I don't advocate for publishing content that is solely produced by AI, then I don't think that you need to. And I think that we have to be careful about personifying AI. And even though it is conversational, the way that I think is healthy, if I could say such a thing, to think about AI and these chatbots is like a spreadsheet. Do you cite Excel when it crunches some numbers for you? No, probably not. But so I treat it generally the same way. And I gotta say, if you gotta be careful about, another reason why you want to be careful about publishing content that is produced by AI on your website is that your SEO, your search engine optimization will take a hit.
Okay, talk about that a little bit more. Why? Why is it going to take a hit?
Because it's not, there's a number of reasons, and I don't want to get too down the technical rabbit hole because I feel like I'll probably exceed my expertise quickly. But as I understand it, it has to do with the accuracy of the information, and it plays to your domain authority. And right now I'm sort of getting out of my comfort zone, but I can say this: I've heard from many people who know SEO a whole lot better than I do, that and they've run experiments where your SEO will take a hit if you post content that is purely done by an AI.
But that's a point, right? That's another tool for your intern, is to make sure that you're monitoring SEO and how that will be impacted. Right?
But that's different than like an advocacy thing that where, if you're just sharing an advocacy plan or a draft email with some folks, you're not publishing that anywhere. You're just sending an email. That's not going to be problematic. And that's where this is really useful for brainstorming. It's really useful for coming up with article titles and all kinds of interesting things like that, creating first drafts, just getting you off of that initial phase of, all right, I have this task to do, but I've got that inertia and I'm not really sure how to start. Ask it some questions, prime some roles, and it'll produce some nice content for you.
Yeah. Carlos, were you going to say something about SEO?
Say, in terms of the SEO, right? And if you write it and it's purely generated by AI, there's got to be some AI detector, right? And so that is subjective as well, right? And so it could guess wrong. And so you have to think about that. And touching on the ethical aspect, and so do I cite it if I use it? I think for the most part, people have good intentions, but on the other side, right, I think in the future, there's going to be a big blend. You're not going to know where content is coming from, right? So you have the good people that say, hey, I'm using it. And then you've got the bad players who don't care. And so at some point, you're going to have the ones that don't care, they may win out.
Yeah. And Tobin just cited another reference. Always good to have a librarian in the conversation.
Yes.
Sherry, somebody was asking you a question. Are you using AI to create better form letters when you're using tools like Fiscal Note, Voter Voice to refine the message and make those better?
So I think customers are using the tools to refine their messages or give multiple answers. Multiple options for people to send. That's not built into the platform. There's a slippery slope there. We don't want machines talking to machines, on the receiving end of that message either. But I do think some client experience that I have had with my own is that is a shortcut that a lot of organizations are using. They are building their initial message, and then they're taking that outside of the platform and saying, give me 5 versions of this. They're also using it for social posts. So if you want to be posting 5 times a day on Twitter or twice a day on LinkedIn, they will write something put it in ChatGPT and say, give me 3 versions of these. And one might be with more urgency, or one might be that appeals to, the younger crowd, or that appeals to, a certain somebody that likes red cars, or, like
Right.
they can put little qualifiers in there.
Yeah, and you can fine tune it. Mark, you're nodding.
Yeah, 100%. So that's
one of
exactly
the-
what I've done with our action alerts. So we have model response, and we encourage our members to customize, and anybody can use our advocacy center, of course, but it's typically directed. The audience that we appeal to is, of course, AIHA members, and so we have model letters that we encourage folks to customize, but there's different versions that you can have, and so it's easy to just have GPT or what have you prime it into a role and say, write this from the perspective of someone. And I've even, as a starting point, not as the final product, I want to emphasize that I've always edited the final product because it's not perfect, but it gives you that inspiration sort of to say, all right, write this from, I've even asked it literally, it's sophisticated, say, write this from the perspective of an AIHA member going to a member of Congress who sits on this committee. And it will do it.
Wow.
It's not, and it's decent.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then you can say, all right, now write it to, now create a version to a member of Congress who's on a different committee.
Right.
And you can create, and like, all right, so how long would that have taken me? Half hour, an hour? It spit it out in 20 seconds.
Yeah. And I've seen the same urgency. I think, Carlos, you use this for membership, right? 90 days out, please renew, 30 days, a little bit more urgent, a little bit more. That is fascinating to me when it does the different versions, when you're asking it just nuance to layer and fine tune the response.
I think it's a powerful tool. And just one other thing, we are in the creator economy, and with the accessibility to APIs in these tools, I mean, people can create, again, their own products, front end and back end website development, along with the Python code, and stand something up pretty quickly. So there's going to be a proliferation. There already is, right? But you're going to see more. People.
What are some of your favorite tools, Carlos? We have you on the list for sharing some of your tools.
Some of my favorite tools that I've used are, Chat PDF. It allows you to have a conversation with a PDF, right? I don't know if you see those limitations. In terms of my team, from a technology perspective, I see, Amazon Code Whisperer. I see GitHub's, Copilot. So again, I'm experimenting with these. I'm encouraging my team, my developer team, to experiment with some of these things, complementary to what they do, right? I'm not saying it's what you do, but you can get better and you can get some ideas. You have such thing as coder's block, right? Like writer's block. And so I encourage them to use Chat GPT to get around that particular obstacle and figure out a way, and it helps. So those are some things that I would suggest, and we'll provide a resource guide for that as well.
Okay. And Mark, are there any other advocacy specific tools that you're adding in addition to just the 3 big ones that you mentioned? Are there other fine tuning, like Carlos mentioned, that you like in the advocacy land? Yeah,
so there's some fun things. These are less productive and less serious, but I've used them, and like they add a little window dressing. As an example, Bing's image creator. So it's a fun little tool that'll create stuff for you. And as an example, I had a government relations committee meeting yesterday, and so you create the event on our online members platform, and there's a little preview picture. So I asked the Bing's image creator to create a picture of the U.S. Capitol building surrounded by pink cherry blossoms, and it produced some really nice pictures. And so I used that. So that's AI image creation. Now, on a more sophisticated sense, and this is where this gets into some meaty issues regarding security and public opinion and deep fakes and things like that, that if you want to have a more sophisticated, advanced advocacy campaign where you're really pushing a particular, where you're trying to influence people in a significant way, then let's say that you want to you want to create a video of some stakeholders in a certain setting. So right now, your option is to go out and find some people who are willing. You got to like do a casting call sort of, and find those people in that setting and spend the money to go to that place. And it's going to take a lot of money. It's going to take a lot of time to create that asset that you can use as part of an advocacy campaign to say, you should be caring about this issue because here's how it impacts people. And so increasingly with AI, you can use tools that are very sometimes free or they're low cost to create artificial assets. So instead of spending all that time and money and resources, you can use a series of prompts and you can knit together a sort of commercial for your issue. Now, you might think that's kind of like weird, but think of it this way. This is an example that I've used with folks before, that if you see a commercial for a prescription drug, then you see on the bottom usually, hey, these people are just actors. They're not real. They're not patients. They're just actors. Yep. So what you see there is what you're consuming is a digital representation of people that don't actually exist. How is that functionally significantly different than creating an asset with AI?
Yeah.
Maybe not that much, especially when it gets increasingly convincing. Now, every tool has a sharp edge that we must be mindful of. Tools can be used for nefarious or great purposes. And so we must be mindful of those things and always have ethics foremost in our minds. But, and there's another thing, right? So other, foreign nations, other actors who are not favorable to us, who might want to foment things. I realize that we're getting into that other discussion now, but these are some of the things that I'm thinking about. I'm like, so
how are you building trust? Like, as you think about these things, Mark, like it's tough, right?
Right.
And so what are some of the ways that, as an advocate, you are saying this is how we need to build trust with each other? And like you were saying over and over, you have to learn to live with these tools and coexist and have them help you. But how are you educating people and building trust and, being skeptical, but in a responsible way, not like a blocking way? What are some of those ways that you're starting to build
these
trust?
Conversations and saying, I don't have all the answers. These are thorny issues. And so what I encourage folks to do is to engage with this conversation early. Don't just sit back and sort of be a consumer or a bystander and wait for things to happen, especially the association community. I think it's important for all of us to step up and be part of this conversation with these AI product developers, and there are many. But I know ASAE is doing a really great job with this, obviously, with having this and have other events that we'll talk about later. But that's what I'm doing is pretty much almost in every venue. And then I'm talking about how we can incorporate AI, and then how, as these tools become more sophisticated, we can use them in a responsible way to advance our mission. In this case, AIH's mission is to protect workers and their communities, so very noble mission. And if there's any tools that we can use to help more people, protect more people in their communities, then of course we want to do that. But there are real risks to be concerned with, and there are real concerns. Like, policymakers are all concerned about deepfakes right now, and rightly so. So that's part of the conversation that we need to acknowledge. It's not just about productivity. There's a lot of trust that we need to go through.
Yeah. How about in your industry, Carlos? Is there anything specific that you're trying to do to, just balance the trust and the skepticism that people should kind of keep in their mind?
We do not. We're a credentialing organization, and so we don't talk about AI with our participants. But I think in terms of building the trust, you've got to experiment with it. You have to have that experience, right? If you have folks talking about, oh my God, AI can do everything, we probably haven't gone down that path yet. I think, that was my reaction when I first started with it, but the more that I tinkered with it, mistrust or trust, right? I had to experiment with it myself to gain that trust. I don't fully trust it, right? Again, we talked about verifying first before trusting. I thought it, because it can get you in trouble.
Okay. Mary Kay or Sherry, what do you think are some things people should consider when you're building these relationships and educating people?
I feel like I've been through this cycle many times. When email first came out, people were not that trusting of email, didn't think it was a good way of interacting with elected officials. Like,
right. Oh, true. Yeah.
then we got to social media and people were saying, no, the legislators weren't using social media in the beginning.
Right.
So you could only kind of like shame them in social media. Now, almost every single legislator at the federal level and almost all of them at the state level are using social media. So we've crossed that. TikTok came out. We've seen people use that very effectively to gain viewers and to spread awareness about their issues and get people to activate and give money even.
Right.
So
True.
I feel like this is, it's just another tool in the toolbox. If people just want to shut the door and not use it, they're going to be behind. Just like not building your social audience many years ago and being, a front runner. You don't have to go and take big risks. I don't feel like in the front. You can toy with this. I do think there's a lot of efficiencies. We've just patented an advocacy usage with just helping people get better open rates on their emails and deliverability of their emails. So that like we're using AI to help people to prompt customers like Mark to say that this is not a good subject line. You might want to consider shortening it. You might want to consider taking this word out. You might want to consider, like it's suggesting things that are built on AI because we have the data on what works and what gets open rates. So there's lots of things like that. You don't have to go full force and like make this the end all to be all. I don't think technology is that. It's still going to be a human element, and it's up to us as leaders in the industry, all of the people on this panel today, to keep spreading the word how to ethically and smartly, test out these tools in our toolbox.
So Mark, somebody was asking about a citation for the video. If you create a video, is that?
Yeah, right. Like, so I've never actually done that yet.
I was like, I don't know.
I would imagine so, right? Like maybe you don't have to, but I mean, because you have to imagine that that's going to be kind of the way of the future. And I've certainly heard folks talk about this in like movie settings, obviously, which is a different context. But instead of having a bunch of extras, then you create these digital assets, these digital extras. So yeah, I would. There are definitely protocols that are going to need to be created about this. But I just touching on this on the policy discussion. So one of the things that AIHA does have is a clear policy on content that's submitted to either our blog or our magazine or journal, that it can't be generated with AI. So, or it can't be like solely generated by AI. So yeah, there's a lot of, but yeah, I don't know about. Plus, like honestly, I had higher expectations maybe about the quality of content that is like the pictures that like that's what this is like. There's a hype and then there's the reality, and that these bots are still hallucinating. If you ask it to produce a picture, I can't tell you how many times I've said, well, because I wanted to see what would happen. So I put into whether it was Midjourney or the Bart or Bing's image creator to like just create an image of constituents walking up the steps of the US Capitol building, and the horrors that were produced, it was like there were like, you do not want to share any of those. They're barely human looking. It's like this. Yeah, like you don't even want to look at the results of those things, because I was like, I wanted to share this on LinkedIn and some other places, like, oh, look at how amazing this technology is, but I just couldn't, whether it was Dolly or any of the other services. It just, so that's where, but there is deep fake technology out there. If you take the time, the money, and you have the knowledge, or you hire someone, then you can do it. You can create these assets, but just like the casual user, it's not there yet.
Good. Okay. All right. So I'm watching our time. We have a couple closing announcements, but I think what we're asking people is to give this a try and keep working with it, create some colleagues or to work together and test things out, hold each other accountable, right? Create policies and let them evolve as this industry unfolds, right? And just keep, like you were saying, Mark, keep educating and trying and, testing this in your everyday life, right?
Yeah, and I think
So
like,
there's-
Carlos, maybe, I don't know, Carlos, are you able to, if we have like a minute or two, Carlos, are you able to share some of the tools that you want suggest folks to play around with?
Yeah, let me pull that up really
You wanna
quick.
show one?
We'll share the
Yeah,
link.
so while he's doing this, I think ASAE has another session coming up. Mary Kate, could you share that link in the chat so people can keep going and keep learning?
Yes, we actually have 2 upcoming
Oh,
sessions.
2, all right.
So one is AI chat, critical conversations surrounding Chat GPT and generative AI, and that's on May 11th. That's a paid program, $36 for members, $47 for non-members. I'm gonna put that in the chat right now.
Thank you.
And the second program is not advertised yet, but it is May 8th at noon, and it's from the Government Relations and Advocacy Professionals Council, and it's on managing contract lobbyists. So we'll get that
Great.
out, both of them, to everyone who is on the list.
Okay, cool. And then just another plug, if you want to be a volunteer at ASAE, the volunteer applications are open right now. So if you want to join one of us in our amazing councils, please apply. So Carlos, do you want to take us home with
Some of the tools, and again, we'll share this resource guide, but again, there are tools that are getting better, they're evolving. Mini GPT, I think, was released yesterday, and so now you can natural language processing via prompt, you can create a video. And so that's coming out. You talked about Midjourney, Mark, and I use that as well. And there's a free version, there's a paid version. I'm not sure what the difference is, but you can create an avatar. And again, I think the important thing to underscore is get in there and try some things out. I think you are at a disadvantage if you just sit on the sideline for this one. It's going to take you some time to catch up. Otter.ai is another one that I use. I invite to my meetings, even if I'm there or I can't make it. It produces a nice summary of the conversation, right? I can take that a step further and say, format it this way, board minutes, committee meetings, so on and so forth. I think that's really helpful. See, Synthesia, Mark, do you want to quickly talk about that one?
Yeah, so there are so many tools that I've heard of but have not yet played around with. That's one of them.
Okay. All right. So see, that's your homework. So we really appreciate everybody joining us today. And we'll just try one, and we'll have another session soon where we should do like a hackathon or an idea swap of like what are the top tools that are emerging and which ones have faded away. So thank you again, Mark and Carlos and Sherry, for joining us today, and Mary Kate for keeping us moving. So we really appreciate seeing everybody.
And is the recording going to be made available, Mary Kate? I think
Yes, we will send the captioned recording along with some resources.
Excellent.
Awesome. Thank you all.
Stay tuned for that as well.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.